Hi, and welcome to Straight to the Points. I'm your host, Courtney. I'm here to help you take your family on amazing vacations for almost free with the help of credit card points and miles. I'm a mom and primary care physician, and I believe that travel is an important way to restore, connect, and celebrate. This podcast is designed for busy people who want to learn how to take unforgettable trips with minimal out-of-pocket cost and don't want to devote a ton of time to figuring out the world of points and miles. I'll get you your first trip booked in just a few months. Let's get straight to the points. Hello, and welcome to Straight to the Points. Today is a destination inspiration episode. I'll be talking about our recent trip to Santorini. Santorini is well known for its iconic white and blue dome buildings crowding the cliff edge with an Aegean Sea and a sunset background. It's iconic for a reason. The views on the island, essentially everywhere, are incredible. This is a destination that I truly found was worth the hype. But I will say that there are ways that people typically experience Santorini that I would definitely not recommend. Stay tuned for a curated list of experiences not to be missed and what to skip. I promise my recommendations are going to be different from the typical crowded sunset views from Ia that you see again and again on social media. And best of all, I'm of course going to talk about how to do it all on points and miles. This trip was totally a follow the deal type of situation where an incredible, almost seemed too good to be true deal on a hotel presented itself. I snagged it and then I planned the trip around that. More often in points and miles, I'm thinking about a specific destination or trip I want to take, figuring out what points I have to earn to make that happen, and then planning the trip. Other times, a really awesome deal comes along, you snag it, and you plan everything around that. This was one of those situations. As I was planning out this episode, I really had a lot of material that I wanted to talk about, both about the trip specifically, but then also using the trip itself to kind of springboard onto other topics in points and miles that you could apply to other trip planning. Because of this, I decided to split this episode into two parts. Today, I'll be talking about our hotel stay, how we booked that on points and miles. I'll be talking about other hotel options in Santorini, both low and no budget options. I'll also talk about all of our experiences there and things to do in Santorini, what I would recommend, what I wouldn't recommend, and the overall Santorini experience. Next episode, I'll delve into the travel aspect, getting there. I'll talk about our business class flight on Emirates, how you can book that flight, as well as other options for flights to Santorini. I'll also talk about the rental cars, bus system, kind of all of the transportation aspects. And in both episodes, I'll be talking specifically about our trip, but then also giving ideas and principles that you could use and apply to your own trip planning, whether it's to Santorini or elsewhere. So let's get to it. The deal that sort of sparked this whole trip was that there was an error on the part of Hyatt. Essentially, there was some kind of glitch in the Hyatt system, and all of the hotels that were under Mr. and Mrs. Smith were priced way, way low. These were essentially mistake rates. I found out about this because I was in a Facebook group of other people in points and miles, and someone posted frantically, everyone get on and book Mr. and Mrs. Smith hotel stays through Hyatt. They're all priced incredibly low. These were pricing less than 2,000 points a night for luxury properties, which is absolutely unheard of. Typically, Hyatt hotels, the lowest price you're getting is around 5,000 points for a Category 1 hotel. And those are really basic properties. And in this case, these were luxury properties for less than the cost of the most basic properties Hyatt has to offer. I saw the post on Facebook and I immediately jumped on the Hyatt app and started looking. I didn't have any specific ideas in mind for travel. I wasn't planning on booking anything that day, but I kind of went with the first two locations that came to my mind, Santorini and Porto, Portugal. Those are two places that my husband and I have talked about going to in the past, and I went ahead and started doing searches. The site kept crashing and I'd have to reopen the app and start again. I'd get to the point of booking, it would crash and close. There were a lot of people that were jumping on because of this glitch, basically, that was causing these incredibly low rates. Ultimately, I was able to book 2 stays. I booked a stay in January for Porto, Portugal, and then I also booked a trip to Santorini for an 8-day stay in April, which is this trip. The Mr. and Mrs. Smith properties are all independently owned properties. They are not Hyatt properties. There's basically a collection of independent hotels that you can book through Hyatt with Hyatt points. These properties are all subject to dynamic pricing, so there can be incredible variability between nights based on demand in terms of the points prices, which is more similar to how the other major reward programs work, like IHG and Hilton. This hotel, Santorini Sky, typically runs between 30 and 85,000 points per night or more. There definitely were nights I searched that were over the 85,000, but I would say 30,000 for the off-season nights, 85,000 plus for the more peak times like summer. So obviously at less than 2,000 points a night, we got an incredible deal. Since the Mr. and Mrs. Smith hotels are all independent hotels, they're going to have different cancellation policies, and they are not necessarily the same as Hyatt's policies. I'm used to being able to speculatively book Hyatt stays and then cancel them with no penalty as long as it's within a few days outside of the stay. The policies for the Mr. and Mrs. Smith hotels are not that generous. And I could have been stuck with having to pay for having to cancel this. I really should have looked more into the cancellation policies before I speculatively booked both of these trips. I didn't, and it ultimately all worked out for us. But I had to do a lot of legwork once I had to make changes to our trip plans, which I'll talk about in a little bit. In general, I would absolutely recommend this hotel, even though you wouldn't be able to book it, obviously, at the rate that I got it. This hotel was incredible, one of the nicest places I've ever stayed, and I absolutely think it would be worth the typical points pricing to stay there. The hotel was located just outside of Pyrgos on top of a mountain, and it's sort of at the midpoint between the north and south portions of the island of Santorini. The most common places to stay in Santorini are northernmost end, which is Ia. That's where you see all of those classic pictures of the blue and white domes and the sunset views. But honestly, views like that are all over the island. You don't have to be in Ia to see those views. Fira is a little bit south of Ia, and that's where the cruise ships typically come in. And so that is a more touristy area in general and also more populated. And then there's the whole rest of the island. Pyrgos is a little bit further south of that and more inland. Our hotel wasn't right on the coast, but because Santorini is so small, essentially everywhere you are, you're going to see ocean views. It was in a really neat location situated on top of a mountain at basically one of the highest points on the entire island. And so we had incredible views of the ocean, the sunset, without being in the crowded area of Ia, where people more often stay. In terms of where to stay in Santorini, I've got a couple of recommendations for low budget versus no budget options. For low budget, the best option I found was a place called Delion View. This is in Fira, and it's bookable through Built using the Built portal for between 13 and 25,000 Built points per night. This seemed to really hit the balance of being a nice looking property with good views, close to restaurants and things to do, and being a low points price. There are definitely less expensive points places to stay, or other places that are bookable through the Built portal with Built points or other portals. But this one seemed to hit the balance of having the things you would want in a hotel in Santorini while being a relatively low points price. You definitely could go lower though. In terms of the no budget options, Santorini Sky would absolutely be my number one pick. I looked a lot into the other more luxury properties on the island, and I wound up just coming away really happy that we were at Santorini Sky. This really was an accident again because I just booked this mistake rate very quickly without researching it, but it did wind up being a really amazing option. One of the other options I would consider is Cannabis Epitome. This is between 120 and 150,000 points a night, which is a lot of points. This is an SLH hotel or small luxury hotel. So another collection of independent hotels that's bookable through Hilton, sort of in the same way that Mr. and Mrs. Smith properties are bookable through the Hyatt program. If you're transferring points from Amex, The ratio is 1 to 2. So if you were booking a property at, say, 120,000 points a night, you would need 60,000 Amex points a night to do that. Still a lot of points, but it does make it sting a little bit less. One option I would really consider skipping is Cannabis Ia Suites. That is a similar hotel. It's also located in Ia, like Cannabis Epitome, but it's in a much more crowded area, and it really just looks super congested and like there would be tons of tourists just kind of flocking all around that area at all times. The location of Cannabis Epitome, though it is very close, also in Ia, is a little more protected and you have more unobstructed views. I did view both of these properties in person, and I would consider staying at Cannabis Epitome, but not Cannabis Ia. There are, of course, lots of other points options, but those would be my top picks for low budget versus no budget. Let's talk a little bit about Santorini Sky specifically. I honestly cannot say enough good things about this property. It was truly amazing. It is, like I said, situated on top of a mountain and outside of the main touristy areas of the island. And so it's extremely quiet. It's a small hotel with just a few suites, and each suite has its own private infinity pool and hot tub on a private balcony. All these balconies overlook the ocean and have incredible sunset views. So no matter what room you're booking at this hotel, you're going to have incredible views, privacy, peace, and quiet. The room itself was beautiful. We had a small kitchenette. We also had a big living room and then huge sliding glass doors from the living room that opened onto our private balcony with the pool and hot tub. We then had a bedroom that had another set of huge sliding glass doors also leading out onto that balcony. We had a bathroom attached to the bedroom with a shower, as well as a second outdoor shower, which was very cool. And then there was actually a second bathroom, a powder room, by the entrance off of the kitchen and living room area. It had absolutely everything we needed in terms of little touches. All of the bath products were luxury. There were robes that were very nice. All of the linens were very nice. Everything felt very high end. The service was amazing. Prior to my stay, a concierge from the hotel reached out and asked if we needed any help with recommendations for restaurants or activities. They did offer some activities that we could book through the hotel ahead of the stay, and this included a wine tour, massages in our room, a cruise, and rides to and from the airport. And we did take advantage of some of these things, which I'll get into in a minute. Another surprise that I did not realize when I booked this hotel is that a lot of food is included. There is daily breakfast. There's a small, essentially what I would call a lounge with both indoor and outdoor seating. It's tiny because there's really only a few rooms at the property, so the number of people going is pretty small. In general, there would be between 0 and maybe 6 other people in the lounge at a given time when we went to eat. For breakfast, they would have a big spread. Hot food, eggs, croissants, pastries. They would also have meats and cheeses, as well as a fridge that had fresh fruit cut up, yogurt. There was a very nice Nespresso machine that made lattes and things like that automatically. Really everything that you would want for a breakfast. There was then a nice both indoor and outdoor area to eat. During the times that were not breakfast, most of the day that lounge area was open and had all kinds of drinks and snacks available also for free. There was in general a spread of different homemade granola bars, lots of different candy and cookies that were all really delicious. And then there would usually be another fresh option that was rotating through the day. There would be a quinoa salad one day. Another day there were some cheese-filled pastries with spinach. And really, depending on the day, sometimes this was enough to make lunch. There also was a big fridge full of soft drinks, sparkling water. That was all included. And they did have alcohol as well, which you could purchase. Also of note, the tap water on Santorini is not appropriate to drink. You have to drink bottled water or water from a special filter. Our room had one sink in the kitchen that actually ran through a filter, and that water was safe to drink. So we had unlimited drinkable water, which was really nice. I had kind of expected to spend quite a bit of money on getting bottled or filtered water during this stay, and the fact that that was included was really nice. And then the breakfast and the snacks available really wound up being most of our food for the trip. We definitely wanted to experience the local food, and we did eat food from restaurants, typically for dinner every night, but we also felt like for breakfast and those snack type foods that were available, we were getting a great taste of Greek food, which was really nice. I wound up spending not very much money on food on this trip at all because of being able to access this lounge, which was a really nice bonus. The vibe of Santorini Sky was generally romantic and relaxed. It was essentially all couples staying there. We did see one family of 2 adults and then a child that was maybe around age 10. But otherwise, we just saw couples there. So it definitely was more of a couples type of place. Our room just had 1 king bed, and most of the rooms were like that. But I do believe there are a couple of rooms that have 2 queen beds. Before we arrived, we did all kinds of research about what restaurants we wanted to go to and places that we want to eat. And essentially all of that wound up going out the window once we saw our hotel. A lot of what you hear about Santorini is trying to get a great sunset view. And honestly, you can get this most places. There's a lot of obsession over being in Ia and seeing the sunset in Ia at a restaurant, and you will pay a premium for those sunset views in Ia. Once we saw the view from our room, we knew, wow, we can get incredible sunset views with no other people here. We didn't really want to eat out as much as we thought we would once we saw how incredible this property was. So ultimately, we wound up eating only 1 meal out at a restaurant, and we got takeout the other 2 nights that we were there. This was a quick 4-night stay. So the first night we got in late after dinner. The second and third nights, we ordered takeout and ate it looking out at the sunset from our own private balcony. And then on the last night, we did go out to dinner. In terms of low budget versus no budget options, here's what I would suggest with dining in Santorini. For low budget options, I would suggest the Coffee Lab in Fira. Excellent espresso beverages. The pistachio flavoring was amazing. Pistachios grow native to Santorini, and so any chance I had to get something with pistachio, I was getting it. And the pistachio latte did not disappoint. We also really liked Mythos, which is in Pyrgos. This is where we ordered takeout from the first night. Santorini Sky partnered with Mythos, so we could actually just text the order to the concierge in WhatsApp, and then they would place the order, and then it came right to the door of our suite, which was amazing. There also is an app called Wolt, which is essentially DoorDash on Santorini, and so you can use that to order from lots and lots of different restaurants. Mythos was amazing. We had tzatziki, spicy feta cheese dip, grilled peppers, moussaka, which is one of the traditional Santorinian dishes, which is sort of like a Greek version of shepherd's pie, I would say. It contains eggplant, it has potatoes on the top, sort of like shepherd's pie, and then there's also beef. We also got Santorinian salad there, which we ate a lot of on this trip. It's essentially a salad that it doesn't have lettuce. It's cucumbers, tomatoes, red onions, capers, and then some light olive oil for dressing, and then a huge chunk of fresh feta cheese on top. Mythos, I would definitely recommend as a lower budget option. We did not pay much at all for a large amount of food for our takeout there. We had such a good time with takeout in our room with the sunset views our first full night there that we ordered takeout again the second night through the Wolt app. And we got a huge spread of food, all different kinds of cheeses. There was this block of cheese that was grilled and then had a raspberry compote and pistachio on top of it, feta wrapped in phyllo dough. There was swordfish, which was incredible. There was this dip that was made from caviar that had this salty, not really fishy taste to it, but salty sort of savory flavor that you could use to dip bread in or use on the swordfish. Really, none of the food was disappointing. It was all great. And it was relatively inexpensive when we were ordering through the restaurants in Pyrgos. Pyrgos, which was the town, I would say about 5 minutes away from the hotel that we stayed in, is generally a village where locals live. And so the food was more authentic and in general less expensive. It was a very cute village with lots of different bars, restaurants, and things like that. We thought we would be spending a bunch of time there, but again, ultimately, our room was so special that we really wanted to be in the evening after we had been out all day. The last low-budget recommendation for eating in Santorini would be Grigogis Bakery in Fira. Lots and lots of amazing treats, breads, things made right there on site that were so delicious. I also really recommend checking out a grocery or convenience store. One of the nights we ate in, we went and got a whole bunch of different beer that was at a convenience store and kind of just sampled. They sold them individually. So we sampled a whole bunch of different kinds of the beer. And then we also grabbed some snack foods. I think it's always really fun to try snack foods in other areas. There was a tzatziki flavored Pringle, which was unique. There was some chocolate made in Santorini, pistachios from Santorini. They had a lot of snacks with sesame. There were these snacks that were essentially like a bar made from sesame seeds and honey, some of them with nuts. That was really delicious. So we enjoyed those different snacks in our room, kind of supplemented with the food in our lounge for lunches. And all of those things were very affordable in general at the grocery stores and convenience stores. In terms of no budget, higher end options for eating on Santorini, the two places I would recommend are Mama's and Mia's. I didn't go to either of these places because we wound up opting for the lower cost takeout options. Not necessarily because we didn't want to spend money, but because, again, the views from our room were so great, we didn't really want to leave. Mama's restaurant is in Fira. It's a mostly seafood restaurant, but has lots of Greek food options. The menu looked absolutely amazing. This is in Fira, which is one of the more touristy areas. So if you are going to be there, especially in high season summer, you definitely would want a reservation at this place. The other recommendation is Mia's restaurant, which is in Ia. This is also a busy area of the island, and so you would definitely want a reservation. This would be a great place to watch the sunset, so try to book during the sunset because you can dine outdoors and have amazing views of the sunset while eating there. This place also had lots of Greek food, including many, many seafood options. I do want to also point out some places that are splurgy options that I don't think are worth the price. I didn't eat at either of these places, but we did go and check them out in person. There's in Ia a group of 4 or 5 water level restaurants at the ports of Amundi and Aramini Bay. So most of Ia is situated kind of at the top of the cliff edge. And then you can take these really extensive stairs all the way down to the level of the ocean. And then there's a bunch of higher end restaurants there. We went and checked these out intending to eat there. And we went and looked at menus of all of them and ultimately left without eating, even though we were hungry, because they didn't really have many seafood options, which seems so strange because you're right at sea level and you're right at the water. And it just, a lot of these places sort of were advertised as having great seafood, but then the number of choices they had just were very minimal. They all had calamari and maybe mussels and one or two other things. I wanted swordfish, sea bass, cod, something. I wanted some kind of seafood option that wasn't mussels or calamari, basically, and that was very hard to find at any of these restaurants. One of them seemed to really specialize in beef. They had this big case of Wagyu beef and all this stuff. And I mean, it looked good, but for me, when I'm traveling, I'm kind of wanting to eat food that is unique to that area. And there are no cows on Santorini, so I didn't really go there to eat beef. And these restaurants are all quite pricey. So these are the places you're often seeing on social media, but I really wouldn't recommend any of those water level restaurants in Ia. Quick side note, if you have an Amex Gold or Amex Platinum with Resi credits, there are many, many restaurants on Santorini that would qualify for the Resi credit. We looked into some of these options, but ultimately didn't eat there. Once we left the Aramundi Bay area where Nick's and some of the other sea level restaurants are that we weren't so happy with, we walked back up into Ia. And we wound up finding a place. I unfortunately don't remember the name of it, but we had a nice dinner. The food was very good, but I would say not as good as the food that we had in Pyrgos. It did have a great view of the sunset. They had some decent cocktails there and solid food, but nothing that I would go out of my way to recommend. Let's talk about activities in Santorini. One of the things that we focused our trip on was walking and hiking. One of the days of our trip, we completed the walk from Fira to Ia, which is about 8 miles. We did sort of the long version of this where you start on the far end of Fira and then walk all the way through Fira, all the way to Ia, and then we walked all the way through Ia to the very, very tip of the island where there's some castle ruins and then those restaurants that I talked about that you can go down to sea level to view. This was probably my favorite day of the trip. We kind of explored Fira at a slow pace going through. There's lots and lots of stairs on this walk. This is absolutely not a stroller or little kid-friendly walk, in my opinion. It's really not accessible. So if people have mobility issues, this would not be a good walk to take. Lots of the streets are pedestrian only, and you're essentially walking through little narrow pedestrian walkways with lots of cute little shops and things like that on either side. And very often you're going down a flight of stairs, walking a small path, then going up a flight of stairs. There were a lot of up and downs. So that first 2 miles of our trip going right through Fira felt kind of challenging, more so than I expected, honestly. And then once we got through Fira, it's more of a, there are ups and downs, but there's fewer stairs and it's a little less intense. The walk from Fira to Ia, the way that we completed it from the far end of Fira to the far end of Ia was about 8 miles. It's all either on walkways or roads through the towns or gravel, usually crushed gravel or dirt paths. It was all very well defined, easy to see. We did pass other people doing the walk on the way. A lot of people do portions of the walk and some people do the whole thing. There were breathtaking views literally the entire way. I kept feeling like I had to stop and take pictures and videos in the beginning. And then I very quickly realized, wow, it looks like this every step that I take. Every time I turn around, there's a different, more incredible view. It's neat because you can see when you're in Fira, you can look out and actually see Ia where you're ending, and you can sort of see the whole path as it goes up. And the whole time you're on the edge of the caldera. So you're essentially walking on this path that's elevated quite a bit above sea level. And you're looking down this cliffside edge and then down into the ocean. And it really is just gorgeous the entire time that you're on this walk. I would highly recommend doing this if you don't have little kids and strollers with you on a trip to Santorini. I found Fira to be my least favorite part of Santorini that we visited. It's where the cruise ships go, and if you're planning a trip during the summer, you definitely want to look into when the cruise ships are docking, how many cruise ships will be there that day, and plan accordingly. I would not want to be in Fira when a cruise ship let out. There was one cruise there during the day that we were in Fira and Ia, and so it was relatively quiet on the island. They often will have many more cruise ships, and it becomes extremely congested in Fira where the cruise ships dock, and then also in Ia where people can pretty easily get a bus to. So I would generally try to avoid Fira and Ia during those times when there's several cruise ships there if you can. Ia was beautiful. There's a reason that it's iconic, that it has those classic white buildings going up the cliff edge with some of the buildings having those blue domes, amazing sunset views, lots and lots of cool restaurants and shops and places to go. And because we were there in April, it really was quite empty. There were many times when we were the only people in a shop, where we were walking along the paths between shops and there were just a handful of people there. It really was very quiet, and I just kept thinking about all the things I had seen on social media of, pictures of people kind of shoulder to shoulder viewing the sunset in Ia. And it just wasn't like that at all for us at the end of April. And so if you do plan a trip to Santorini, I would really strongly encourage you to consider not going in the summer. And if you do go in the summer, considering spending minimal time in Fira and Ia and kind of exploring other areas of the island, and maybe concentrating your time in Fira and Ia for a quicker part of the trip. Overall, the walk from Fira to Ia was amazing. I would highly recommend it. Like I said, it wound up being 8 miles end to end, but you could do a shorter version, either from Amiroviglia, which is kind of midway between the two, to Ia, or complete the whole thing without going through the entire cities of Fira and Ia for a shorter version. We wound up walking another 4 miles in total once we had gone all the way through Ia, and we saw so much. It was great. The way to do this logistically was for us to ride a bus. We rented a car, which I'll talk about more in the next episode, but many people who do this walk will use the bus system. So we drove to the bus station in Fira, walked from Fira to Ia, finished up in Ia, and then took the bus from Ia back to Fira and took our car back to the hotel. So it's very easy to do this. I will say that the buses were crowded even during this low season area that we were there. So take that into account when you're planning. In terms of other activities, we did a couple of other hikes. We did the Heart of Santorini hike, which is in Megalochori. And this is a really brief, easy hike where you walk up to essentially this hole in the cliffside edge that used to be more heart-shaped, but now is more round. You kind of walk through and look through this hole, and then you see an awesome view of the Aegean Sea and Ia off in the distance, and it's really iconic. You also, from there, can hike further down to the shoreline and then back, which would be a much more challenging hike. We did part of this. We made it almost all the way down to the sea level and then back up, but we were a little bit crunched on time because we had a couple of things we wanted to get done that day, so didn't complete the entire version of that hike, but would definitely recommend that. We also hiked to Ancient Thera, which was a great hike. It's essentially a hike up a mountain. So Ancient Thera, I would definitely recommend going to. It's ancient civilization ruins, and this ancient civilization was considered to be sort of the commercial and religious center of Santorini back in the 1st century BC to the 8th century AD. It's on top of a mountain, and the mountain separates Perissa and Kamari villages. So you can either hike from Perissa up to the top of the mountain or from Kamari to the top of the mountain. We hiked from Perissa, which is where the Black Beach is located. So we saw the Black Beach, hiked up the mountain from Perissa, and then got to Ancient Thera. Unfortunately, we did not do our research well enough, and we arrived at Ancient Thera about half an hour after it closed. It closed at 3:30 p.m. the day that we went. And we did look up hours, but we somehow messed up the dates or something, and we expected to be able to get in and see the full ruins, and we weren't able to. I will say that the hike itself and what we saw was absolutely worth it, even though we missed out on getting inside. But once you get to the top of the mountain, you can see some ancient ruins that are outside of the gated off area. There's an old stone church ruins and a couple of other areas where you can see some ruins and walk right up to them. And then there's a separate area where, there's a kiosk that you would pay to enter and then go into a gated area where there's this big area where you can walk around seeing the ruins of this village. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see that part, but it did look really cool and I would recommend it. If you're not up for the hike, this is accessible by car. However, the road is extremely narrow with lots and lots of switchbacks, and it looked a little dicey to me in terms of driving. So we definitely preferred to walk, and we wanted to hike anyway, but you could access this by car if you wanted to. There was another ancient ruin site that we also checked out, and this was Akrotiri. Akrotiri is another ancient settlement. This one's much older. It's a prehistoric ancient settlement. And they took these ruins and then built a building around the entire thing with walkways so that you can view the entire thing inside, sort of like a museum, but it's the ruins existing as they were found, essentially. This settlement dates back as far as the 4th millennium BC, way long ago. And this became a really large settlement and was one of the main urban ports of the Aegean around the 20th to 17th centuries BC. It had these really sophisticated multi-story buildings with drainage systems, paintings, pottery. I was floored by what things people were able to create that long ago. And the whole city is essentially encased in volcanic ash. So this is sort of like Pompeii, where a volcanic eruption occurred and then basically encased the entire city. The civilization was abandoned before the volcano erupted, and so the area had been vacated and people were not there when this happened. But it's really neat to see this entire city, essentially, of these really complex buildings all encased in volcanic ash. Along the walkways, they have informational signs about what you're seeing. There was also a guided audio tour that you could do for free, and then there were many guided tours going through as we were there. I really didn't think a guided tour was necessary for this. The audio tour that they had was absolutely sufficient to understand what was going on, along with the signs. There also is a separate museum that contains artifacts recovered from this area, and I'm sure that would be a great complement to this. We didn't make it over to the museum. We had a short trip and only so many things we could fit in, but I have heard that that is quite worthwhile to do as well. Those were some of my main low-budget options in terms of things to do in Santorini. The hikes and viewing the ancient civilizations, all very affordable. Let's talk about some more splurgy, no-budget options. Our favorite was a wine tour. This was arranged through our hotel. So they offered us a package where a driver came and got us. Private wine tour. They drove us to 3 different wineries, as well as a couple of lookout points where we got awesome views. He gave us some history of the island. It was a great thing to do our first day because we sort of became oriented to the island and where things were. He pointed out some key features and areas. Because it's so small, he could really take us to the top of the mountain where our hotel sat and kind of point us in different directions and say, here's the red beach, that's where the black beach is, this is where ancient Thera is. And so it was really cool to have a guide to get the layout of the land on our first day. So if you do plan to do any kind of guided tour or wine tour, I would highly recommend doing it at the beginning of your trip. This was definitely a more splurgy activity. It was 420 euros total for the 2 of us, which was $488 based on the current exchange rate. It was absolutely worth every penny. We had a wonderful time. And when you're staying at a luxury hotel for absolutely free, it's much easier to say yes to some more splurgy experiences like this. We went to 3 wineries, all of which I would recommend. Hatzidakis, which was our favorite, Art Space, and Argyros. Hatzidakis is a family-owned winery. We were actually served our wine and had all of the discussions about the wine with the owner herself. It's her and her husband that run it, and they've owned it since the beginning. The entire thing is in a hand-dug cave. Because the island of Santorini is essentially an erupted volcano, there's all this sort of pumice stone type textured material that makes up a lot of the island. And so you can really easily just kind of dig into it and build these caves. So people live or have lived in these caves, and they made a big one to house the winery. And because it's a cave, it's really well temperature controlled. So they are able to store all of the wine in there without having to use any refrigeration or anything like that. They gave us a really nice tour of the winery and talked about how they make the wine. Without telling you too many details, the wine in Santorini is really unique and special, and that was one of the reasons we wanted to experience it. Because the wine is growing in such dry conditions and the grapes are growing essentially out of, it looks like rock. There's really not soil. It's just this like volcanic rock that everything's growing in. The wine has a very mineral quality to it that is really good. And the wine is very impacted by the conditions that year. We actually did something really cool at Hatzidakis where the owner gave us 2 different vintages of the same wine from 2020 and 2025, and we compared how the different flavor profiles based on the different conditions during those years. And she explained to us why we were tasting different things based on the weather conditions during those specific years. Both were delicious, but they were so different. It was really interesting. Many of the wineries make the wine in a traditional way, which involves no irrigation, no pesticides, and all of the grapes are hand-picked. The vineyards aren't accessible for machinery. The grape plants only grow up a foot or 2. That's it. So we're used to seeing big, tall plants in vineyards, and really in Santorini, it's just these little teeny tiny plants growing out of volcanic rock. And they actually sort of wrap the vines of the plants around themselves and make this little basket of vine. And then the grapes kind of sit in the center of that. And so because of this setup and because everything's sort of on uneven ground and cliff edges, they don't use any machinery to pick the grapes. So all of the grapes are hand-picked. They also have wine that they make out of sun-dried grapes. That's very sweet. So that's a dessert type wine that's really unique there. They handpick the grapes, they let them dry in the sun, and then they make wine out of that. And that's called Vinsanto. We had so much fun visiting all the different wineries and learning about the different wines. Hatzidakis was definitely our favorite. Art Space was a really unique space that also had some caves and had art for viewing and for sale. Argyros was the more commercial, bigger type winery. Still not big by any stretch of the imagination as compared to many of the wineries we've seen in the US, but a more commercial operation versus Hatzidakis, which was a really small family-owned operation. At each of the wineries, we got to taste multiple wines, and then they were accompanied by pretty decently sized snacks, cheeses, breads, olive oils, things that paired well with the wines. And that essentially was our lunch for the day. It was quite a bit of food between the 3 wineries. Another popular activity on Santorini is to do caldera cruises. We wound up not doing this, but this would be a more splurgy, no-budget option if you were interested. Through our hotel, there were both semi-private and private tours available. The semi-private tour went to the Red Beach, the Black Beach, around the caldera, and then to hot springs. The cost of this was 200 euros per person, which did include food and drinks. And then they offered a private tour, which was starting at 1,100 euros for the 2 of us. This is a very popular thing to do in Santorini, and there were many options on Get Your Guide and Viator. Ultimately, we wanted to spend more time right on the island and just kind of poking around, and also didn't want to overschedule ourselves. Like I said, we were only there for 4 nights, and we wanted to be able to kind of do what we felt like essentially on the different days. And so we really wanted to minimize the number of things that were actually like booked and scheduled. So opted not to, but if we were there longer, we certainly would have done something like this. And it's a very popular option. I will say a lot of these are advertised as sunset cruises and a great way to view the sunset. And while that's totally true, if you're looking for lower budget options, you can see incredible sunset views from many, many places on Santorini, and you really don't have to be on the water to see the sunset views. So if you're looking to save, this could be something that you skip. You're really right on the ocean edge kind of all the time and seeing the ocean kind of all the time when you're there. So you don't have to get out on the water to feel like you're experiencing the Aegean Sea, or at least that's how we felt about it. We also did another activity arranged through our hotel, and this was having a massage. They arranged for 2 people to come and bring tables right into our hotel room. They set up. We each got a massage for 60 minutes. We paid them in cash directly. And this was, like I said, completely arranged and booked through our hotel. The cost of this was 250 euros for the 2 of us, which worked out to $290, plus, of course, a tip, which I thought was incredibly reasonable. I mean, so that was less than a little under $300 for 2 people for a 60-minute massage. And I've paid more than that, more than $150 for a 60-minute massage at fancy spas in the US, and they were coming right to our room. So this was an awesome deal, and I would definitely recommend that experience if you stay at Santorini Sky. They also offered us rides to and from the airport for 45 euros one way, 35 the other way, and we wound up not taking advantage of that because we rented a car, but that is something that most hotels will arrange if you wish. I want to speak a little bit more about the Mr. and Mrs. Smith booking, how that all works, and some tips for working with Hyatt and Mr. and Mrs. Smith if you do one of these bookings. Like I said, I jumped on this deal. I booked an 8-night stay thinking, okay, I can always just shorten the stay on either end. Let me just snag some dates while they're available, and then I can adjust accordingly, because I was trying to book this very quickly before this mistake deal was updated. We wound up having to change our plans several times. Initially, I tried to contact Hyatt and shorten the stay. So start the stay for basically the second half or part of the second half of the stay that I had booked. And essentially was told, no, you cannot change the stay at all without the price changing. So I would have had to rebook at the current rate at the time, which was over 85,000 points a night, which is, many, many times what I had paid. So of course I didn't want to do that. The agent I talked to said basically, look, this was an error on our end, on Hyatt's end, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith / the independent hotel that you're staying with, Santorini Sky, is going to get paid for this stay, but Hyatt didn't charge you the correct amount of points. We're essentially going to eat this cost. You can't rebook or modify this reservation in any way. Okay, so we were planning then on going for the beginning of the stay and just leaving early and telling the hotel, oh, we're checking out early, and then hoping that there wasn't any kind of cancellation charge or anything like that. So we were planning to do it that way. Then my daughter found out that she was going to be in a play towards the first half of our planned stay. And so we really didn't want to miss that. And we also really, really wanted to go on this trip for an extremely discounted point stay. And so ultimately, I wound up reaching out to the hotel itself. So remember when you're booking with Mr. and Mrs. Smith that you're working with a small independent hotel. Hyatt is the big umbrella that serves as essentially a booking platform for this independent hotel. But really, if you need something in terms of altering your reservation or really anything customer service wise, if you're staying in a Mr. and Mrs. Smith book through Hyatt, work with the hotel directly. They're so much more likely to be accommodating. Hyatt tried to help me. They offered to rebook at the new rate. They offered to not charge me a cancellation fee. If I canceled, they were going to waive that fee. But ultimately, they couldn't help me in the way that I wanted. I contacted the hotel and just said, hey, we've got this 8-night stay booked. My daughter's in a play. We'd like to start our stay later than planned. We're planning on staying for 4 nights, starting this night, ending this night. Would it be possible to start our stay later? Please hold our room so that we can check in on this date, and then we will complete our stay. And they were, of course, very happy to accommodate that. They wound up having someone else stay in our room for those 4 nights that we had booked. They essentially got paid twice, right? Hyatt paid them for those first 4 nights that we weren't in the room, and they had someone else stay in the room during that time, and then we stayed the second half of the nights. They explained that they wouldn't be able to refund any of the points that I used to book the room for the days that we weren't staying. But of course, that was fine because it was less than 2,000 points a night. So tip here, work with independent hotel itself when you're doing any of these bookings where you're booking through a big hotel chain, but then booking a smaller luxury property. So this would apply to SLH book through Hilton and other similar scenarios. 2 big things I learned from planning this trip are 1, jump on the deals when they happen. It also helps to be in Facebook groups, other online forums that can alert you when deals like this come up. I'm sure this exact opportunity will not present itself again, but there will always be situations in points and miles where a really, really awesome opportunity comes along, and it's best to be able to jump right on it. Also, though, pause for a second, look at terms and conditions, and think before you book. Like I said, the cancellation policies for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, for example, are quite strict. And while this didn't bite me, it could have. This also reinforced the belief that I have about there's really no minimum amount of time that makes a trip worth it. I often get questions of, how long should I go to Ireland, or how long do I need in this place to make the trip worth it? Obviously, I love to be on vacation for a week or more all the time, but that's not how life works all the time. And sometimes you're taking shorter trips. In this case, we were leaving our children with my in-laws. We wanted to be there for my daughter's play. And so we were working with 4 nights at the hotel. And this was absolutely worth it. This was an incredibly restorative, fun trip. We had an awesome time, and I would do it again, even if it was the same amount of time. Would we have had a great time for longer than that? Yes, absolutely. But definitely worth it for a 4-night trip. I would say this would even be worth it for a 2-night trip. On the way there, at the end of our Emirates business class flight, I thought, if this trip was ending right now, I'd still be pretty happy with this. So I think the big point here is that there's no minimum amount of time that makes a trip worth it. Certainly, if you want to be able to see and do a certain number of things, you have to stay for a certain amount of time. But you really can do shorter stays and fit in a lot, or focus on the experiences that are most important to you and absolutely make the trip worth it. And the beauty of this is that with points and miles, when you're not spending a ton of money on each trip, your flights are mostly paid for by points. Your hotel stay is completely paid for by points. You don't feel as guilty about booking a plane flight for a relatively short trip. It takes the pressure off to do everything, right? With points and miles, there's sort of this abundance mindset that I've adapted, which is, well, if we're going to get done what we get done here, I really want to enjoy my trip. These are the things I want to focus on. And if we don't get to do everything, that's okay. There will be more trips. There may even be a trip back here to this very place. And booking with points and miles really kind of takes the pressure off wanting to squeeze everything into every trip. It also takes the pressure off everything not being perfect. There's definitely been some travel situations where things have not gone as planned, and it's a little bit stressful, especially with kids. And there's times where I thought, this is fine. We're still going to enjoy our day. We've got these plans tomorrow. This is still going to be a good trip. But I know I would be really upset if I had just blown tens of thousands of dollars on that experience. But because I'm not booking with much cash just kind of takes the pressure off. Oh, well, okay, today's not perfect. That's fine. And it just kind of makes it easier to enjoy when you're not stressed about the money. Anyway, those are some things I took away from this trip. I'm all for a 4-night getaway. You can really fit in a lot of activities and a lot of relaxation. Next time, I'll talk more about the travel to and from Santorini, and in particular, my experience with Emirates Business Class, which was my first business class flight ever, and probably ruined me for life. I'll see you next time on Straight to the Points. Thank you for listening to Straight to the Points. If you're looking for more tips and tricks or travel inspiration, you can find me on Instagram at straighttothepoints.podcast. If you have any questions about earning or using your points, send me an email. I might include your question on a future episode. You can reach me at straighttothepoints.podcast@gmail.com. Please also send me your points success stories. I would love to hear from you. If you are thinking about applying for a points earning credit card, I would appreciate you using my referral links to sign up. Head to straighttothepointspodcast.com and click on card referral links. If you are getting value from this podcast, I would be so happy if you would leave me a 5-star review and a comment wherever you listen. If you want to further support the podcast, click on support on the website main menu, where there is a link to my Buy Me a Coffee account, where you can leave me a tip to help support the podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Straight to the Points.